I literally have my first buck I ever shot tattooed on me. My whole, just my whole life was antlers and shooting. And so I had never even thought about animals at all. Like they were a commodity to me, like they were a product. And looking back, like I can't even believe I'm saying this, but like probably 5 years later, after I switched to plant-based, I'm singing happy birthday to a cow on a rescue sanctuary.
Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then Good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want.
We are so glad you guys are here today. All of you out there, Switch for Good podcast. And our guest today, I'm just going to say, might very well be the most persistent, dedicated, passionate health warrior that we've ever come across. And as you know, we have had some unbelievable stories of humans defying all odds on this show. Born with a genetic disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, Tim Kaufman's joints are very loose and hypermobile. So when he was younger, he was told to move as little as possible in order to manage his condition. Tim's excess weight was often too much for his joints to handle, though, and he would frequently require mobility assistance. In a vicious cycle of pain and medicating, Tim had lost his passion for life, really, and was simply surviving from one day to the next. At his worst, in a typical day, he would consume a liter of vodka, the maximum dose of fentanyl, about 20 opioid tablets, and eat fast food about 4 times. Yeah, something had to change. Inspired to change for his wife, Heather, who's his high school sweetheart, also, who joined him on his health kick, Tim decided to buy a juicer and for 30 days consume nothing but juice. And this is where the story becomes filled with hope. But we want Tim to tell the story. So welcome, Tim, to the Switch for Good podcast.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. It's quite a pleasure and an honor to speak with both of you. And I don't really have to tell my story because you kind of just did it for me. So thanks for that.
Oh, there's so much more. We just we just dropped him off at the juice fast. So there's so much. But you fast forward to today from what I described was certainly a rock bottom, and you're an energetic athlete with a bazillion medals in your backdrop right now. So if anyone's watching this on YouTube, you'll see all of his medals as an athlete, as a triathlete, and as a runner and as a cyclist. And you're thriving on a plant-based diet. You seem to be, I'd say living your best life. But let's begin when you were younger, when you had this condition, which it sounds to me, I don't know very much about it, but almost like a death sentence, because you were told, just don't move too much, and you're a little boy. How did that form your relationship with your body?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Well, I think I just kind of settled for that's what I had. Like, it was so normal for me. When I was younger, it didn't really affect me because I think you're pretty resilient. Your bones and your joints are pretty resilient. You can jump off the couch and land on your knees and it doesn't hurt. But I probably didn't. I think when I was younger, it was more like circus tricks. Like I could bend my thumb all the way backwards and, I could make my thumbs like pop out a joint, make them dance on the bus. And it was like but there was no pain involved with that. The pain started. So ironically, I grew up on a dairy farm, which we should talk about that later. And so dairy farming, we did like kind of old fashioned dairy farming. We had probably 70 milking cows, and we didn't do it by hand, but we carried all the milk by hand. So all that weight was stretching on my wrists and my elbows. And that's when pain started showing up. I would twist my ankle. It wouldn't hurt too bad. I'd get back up and keep walking. But throughout the years, I started working on a farm when I was 13. So probably into my, early 20s, maybe late teens, I started getting some chronic pain. And that's when we kind of knew something was wrong. So I didn't actually get my diagnosis till I was in probably my early 20s or around 20. And that's because I shifted from the dairy farm to a factory, and I started working up over my head, which I wasn't used to, and my shoulder kept dislocating. And it dislocated to the point where I would sneeze and it would just like pop out of me, and I'd have to like hit it to pop it back in. And work actually told me to, go have a doctor look at it. So they thought it was just going to be like a quick, they called it like an arthroplasty, where they would kind of tighten everything up and pull the tendons and ligaments and kind of stitch them to kind of pull everything back together. And when he got in there, he said it was like bubble gum, like everything just kept stretching. So I went in to get my shoulder fixed, and I came out with this diagnosis for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
When they told you, the diagnosis, and they said, I'm not sure if it was in that appointment or a bit later, just try to not move too much. I mean, you're still a young person and you still have your whole life ahead of you. What did that do to your psychology? Or what did you think when they said, try not to move too much? You're going to live a sedentary life, basically.
Yeah, that really came later, that kind of thing. At first, there was so few doctors that were familiar with this. They actually sent me to a pediatrician, like a genetic doctor. My sister ended up going to Yale to get some testing and stuff because she has the same thing. So the diagnosis, like it wasn't, I guess, that chronic yet. Like I had arthritis, but I was living with it, even though, I was in early 20s. But that diagnosis came kind of a few years later, when I started like really having issues. And I started needing supports like the braces and that kind of thing. And then I was getting, I was still a young person. I was mid 20s. And I remember the last time I actually saw that doctor, he was getting disability papers out, and I had just started a career as a machinist. I was excited about my future. We had just bought a house. We had our first kid by then. And I was excited. And this guy's handing me a disability paper. I'm like, whoa, we're not even close to that yet. But then down the road, after things got really painful, really inflamed, that's when the doctor's answer was just, make sure when you sit on a chair, it has arms to support you. You don't want anything hanging. And the worst thing you can do is move. The idea was, you have X amount of life on your joints, and don't use it up quickly.
So you got up to 400 pounds, which probably was very bad for your joints. Was your weight gain because of the Ehlers-Danlos, or was it because of other things that was going on that made you turn to food? And as Dotsie mentioned, there was fentanyl and alcohol involved too.
After that surgery, the doctor sent me out of the hospital with a bottle of Lortabs. And, I grew up, we didn't take aspirin. We just didn't do medicine, And so I came out of the hospital with these things, and they worked really well. I think I had dealt with chronic pain for so long that I didn't know what it was like to not be in pain. And although they didn't take the pain away, they certainly took the edge off of it. And and back then, there was not as much checks and balances on prescriptions. So, I became really creative as time went on. Obviously, the same pills they sent me home with were pretty ineffective after a month. And so I went back to my doctor. I'm still in pain. So he did what doctors do usually. And it made sense to up the dose and up the dose. And we went down that road until there was no place to go on that medicine. So then we'd switch to another medicine. And it just became this cycle. And then, on top of taking, I'd get a 30-day supply of pills and they'd be gone in 5 days. So, then you get creative. And at some point, I feel like the physical pain was there and I justified it. But at some point, I think there was an emotional pain that I was numbing that became greater than the physical pain. And as embarrassing as it is, along with the drugs, I wasn't on fentanyl quite yet, but the fast food kind of gave me the same dopamine hit. It was something I can control. It's something that made me feel good. It gave me something to look forward to. And it's kind of humbling looking back to know, that same kind of feeling I would get before I got pills, I would get at the drive-through of fast food places. And it was the same kind of back end too, because you would, get the pills, take them, feel great for a little bit, 20 minutes tops. And then all of a sudden you'd feel like crap. You'd feel guilty. The food did the same exact thing. I would eat 3 breakfast sandwiches on my way to work, and, I could eat all of them in like 5 minutes. And then when I get to work, I feel like garbage. And I see these greasy wrappers in my passenger's seat. So it's the same kind of cycle. And, the difference is we're around food all the time. We're around this advertising all the time. And so after I got, into the opioid pills, we went like Percocet and then to Oxys. And I did the same, repeated the same cycle. And then my doctor said, well, I want to try this drug called fentanyl. And that was before I had no clue what fentanyl was. And it just wasn't a thing, But that was a transdermal patch, and you would put it on and it would last, I think, 3 days. And it always really only lasted 2 days. And then you had to start figuring out how to get more of those. But along with the fentanyl, we did breakthrough painkillers and stay ahead of the pain. And it just became a mess. I could not get enough painkillers in me.
Yeah, it's a snowball.
So you said it's a mixture. So it sounds like it's a mixture of physical pain, but also emotional pain. And where did that come from?
Yeah, well, just the idea that I probably would have looked you right in the eyes then and said, I'm not an addict. But I mean, there were weeks I would take 200 pills and it's like, what is going on? But so that you're kind of hiding that, you're trying to pretend. I mean, I was very functional. I still worked. I still went to my job, but that was it. Like it took everything out of me to get to work, come home, and then I just crashed on the couch. And, over time you start looking in the mirror and you think, what are you doing? And then, the weight gain started. Probably one of the biggest tipping points downhill for me was alcohol. We never had alcohol in the house. I started life so young. I mean, I met who's my wife now, when I was 13. So and we got married. I had just turned 20. Life started so fast. I didn't hit the party scene. I didn't, go to college parties and stuff. I just didn't have that lifestyle. So I really had no clue about alcohol. I just knew that I wanted to sleep through the night. That's all I wanted to do was get a good night's sleep. And a lot of people don't understand this, but on these drugs, you think they make you so tired. And you're like always groggy, but you never can get like a really good sleep. So I would just toss and turn all night. So I just had enough one day and I'm like, I'm going to get some alcohol. Like, I can't get anything more than fentanyl. I can't get any more pills. So alcohol seemed like that would be the fix for me. And I stopped at a liquor store. I bought a 1.75 liter of vodka, and I drank half of it within minutes, and I passed out and went to sleep. And that was the start of a cycle that never ramped up. It pretty much stayed the same. It was terrible. It was terrible.
I heard you say in a video that, no one had ever told me that I didn't have to be fat and sick. And so during this period, were you just thinking, this is it? This is what it's going to be. This is going to be, there is maybe no way out.
Yeah. And I mean, part of that was my attitude, but I sure was getting helped along by the people in the medical industry that I was seeing. Just as like a disclaimer, my doctor is a very good friend now, and we actually work together. He sends people to me, for advice and stuff. So that's super cool. Yeah. But yeah, I like, not only did I think these are the cards I was dealt, but it's hard for a doctor to say, well, you need to lose weight. And it seems like we have this idea that, well, you lose weight in the gym on a treadmill with a membership. And so what am I going to do? I can't hardly get out of a chair. I can't walk to my truck. So, it was always this, I would listen to exactly what I want to hear. And if he said something like, well, it's hard for you to exercise, that was like, I didn't have to do anything then. Same with the scale. When I went in there and the scale didn't go over 400 pounds, I was devastated when it like maxed out. Mm-hmm. But the reality was, I walked away. I'm like, wait a minute, this is not bad. Like, I can't gain any more weight because you can't measure it anyways, right?
Yeah. There wasn't that light yet that said, hold on, wait a minute, this could be different.
Sure. Well, I mean, we get into this, management idea. We want to manage everything instead of get to the bottom, fix what's really wrong. And it's a genetic disease. So, you really do have to manage it. But there's a lot more we can do as far as managing things. Yeah.
So just to be clear, that the pain you were experiencing was real, but it was exacerbated by the fact that you were overweight and that opioids can also make your pain worse.
They actually can. In fact, if you really take the time to read the side effects, the first side effects is cause pain. They're terrible. I hate to blast them because they do have their use. I think for, a temporary acute condition, I get it, but I felt like I was on a hopeless path with these because you never could get enough of them. And 100%, like, then you get to the point where what's actually causing me more pain? Is it withdrawals? Is it because I think like the number 2 side effect is joint pain, which that's what we're trying to get rid of. But, along the way, then as far as inflammation goes, that was the other thing. I was on some really heavy anti-inflammatories, like Indocin, indomethacin, really hardcore stuff that just destroys your stomach. So
yeah.
And at the same time, you're eating a highly inflammatory diet, but no one really was telling you that. They were just giving you more pills. And what was it like as a family man then? Because you're so close to your wife. You've been with her for so long. You two are devoted, but sounds like that was could have been a really tough time on your marriage.
Yeah, it was definitely. And she talks about it on interviews and stuff. And it gets emotional, but I think both her and I and the kids, Dad was sick, and this was just, they would get up to go for a walk and I didn't go. I was most of the time in a recliner with my feet up and ice on my knees and just trying to get to tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was hard in the, looking back, like it put a ton of extra work on her carrying groceries. She's trying to deal, one of the hardest things is, like listening to the lawnmower start or something, and she's out there trying to juggle two toddlers around and mow the lawn at the same time. And yeah, it sucked. And that's
It's
part of that
amazing.
emotional pain.
It's amazing because I'm just thinking how Dotsie mentioned that you've done 50-mile trail runs and half Ironmans now, but that back then you could hardly get out of the chair. What was the turning point for you then?
It's a full-time job, first of all, being an addict. And it's another full-time job trying to keep up with doctor's appointments almost weekly, for sure, every other week. And life gets busy, and my job is to try to get to bed, get to work, do my thing, and then just pass out. And I just figured this is how it's going to end. I kept gaining more and more weight until, like I said, I got up over 400. But the 400 pounds was tough. But what was even worse, and I probably didn't know it at the time, most of the time, because I just ignored it, but my blood pressure was 255 over 115. And my resting heart rate was like 128, in that range, just sitting, doing nothing. My heart used to beat so hard that, this is back when we had cordless like home phones, I would lay the phone on my chest and it would actually bounce off my chest and get air. You could actually see a space.
Wow.
My kidneys were shutting down. It was rough, and I was hardly moving. Like, it took everything just to get to the car in the driveway. I honestly, like, I don't think I was like suicidal, but I didn't want to wake up in the morning. Like, I was just tired, I was just tired of trying to just survive. And so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but because me and Heather had met so young, our families are super intertwined. She was basically a second mom to me. She had like a cold kind of flu thing that was lasting for weeks.
This is your mother-in-law.
This is my mother-in-law, yeah. And we finally convinced her to go get checked out at the doctor's. And it seemed like a switch just flipped, and our whole world was flipped upside down, because she was diagnosed with leukemia. And from that point, I feel like there was no time to think. There was no what treatments. She went like right into a cancer hospital, and our whole life became, who's going to stay with mom tonight? Who's going to go take this up to her? And she was a super great person. So at the same time, we're dealing with that, just added more onto my wife's plate. My father had like a cough cold thing, and he thought he had pneumonia. So he went to get a chest x-ray, and they found out that he had stage 4 kidney cancer that had metastasized through his whole body. So my two, heroes, and my dad was my best friend in the whole world. And Heather's mom, she loved life. And they gave my dad 6 months to live after his diagnosis. And he made it 6 weeks to the day of his diagnosis, and he passed away. And then a little while after that, Heather's mom lost her battle to leukemia, which turned to lymphoma and then a brain tumor. And we lost her. And, that was rough. That was rough on all of us, and it flipped our world upside down, to say the least.
Yeah. Your heart, your spirit, your soul, it sounds like it had a shift, because it was somewhere around New Year's. You just woke up and said, I'm going to do a juice fast. It was,
yeah,
which is not easy. I mean, that is not, that is a massive shift from where you were. How did you do it? I remember you describing the first 3 days as being literal hell, but waking up on the fourth day. And how did you take just step one? Like, let's go to that first glass of juice.
Well, step one, before that, because I would have definitely not picked that as my choice for my step. The choice was kind of picked for me. Heather used to put my socks and shoes on me like every morning, like a little kid. And I like, after we went through the funerals and everything, this one morning, I don't know, there was nothing really special about it, but she kind of would put my sock on, kind of pat the side of my leg like you would a little kid. And she goes, "You're all set." And I just like looked into her eyes and I'm like, like, she's going to bury me next. Like, we just learned about how to do funerals, and like, I'm next. Like, I'm not going to make it another year. And so I went online, of course, because that's where you get good medical advice. And I found a video on YouTube of this person that got the gastric bypass. So I figured, this is it. Like, this is my chance to, save my life. Went through all of the paperwork, found a place in Buffalo, got everything all set. I even went to a couple classes, and all my doctor had to do was sign off on it. And so I was super excited this was going to happen. And I was so sick he wouldn't. He was worried about the anesthesia, how I would react with all the drugs I was on. Two, he didn't know if my heart would make it. And then the other thing was, he was worried I could hardly stand on my own, that if I lost all this weight, he was just worried my whole body would just fold up. So I believe to this day, I'm the only person he's ever denied the surgery for. And I came home just crushed. And that's when one night I was sitting in front of TV, like I did most nights, and I saw the title "Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead." I'm like, holy crap, that's me. But I had lost a little weight before that, because I tried to like switch things around. I was still doing a ton of dairy, but I was looking for low fat stuff, doing like what everyone does now, right? Like switching the turkey for the beef and all this stuff. But I still felt like absolute crap. That's when I saw Joe Cross's video, and I was just sick of it. I was just sick of everything. And so that's when I ordered the juicer and decided I'd start, which is kind of weird, because how I grew up, avid hunter, avid fisherman. I had all my own cows. Like I say, my dream was to have a dairy farm. Like, that's what my dream was. And I didn't even think about any of that. I didn't know what vegan was. I didn't know what plant-based. I just knew that Joe lost weight doing this thing, and it didn't matter what that thing was. So that's what I did.
And you, as Dotsie mentioned, in the first 3 days, you felt terrible, but the fourth day you woke up and there was some hope there.
Yeah, it was actually pretty amazing. Because I just wanted to sleep. That's all I wanted to do. And that, I think it was the fourth or the fifth day, I woke up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in the same exact position that I fell asleep. I still get emotional. I've told this story probably 500 times. I still get emotional, because that was all I wanted to do, was just wake up, not in pain, And little by little.
So wait a minute though, you do this juice, and there's, you feel terrible for 3 days, 4 days, you wake up as you slept, but you're still taking opioids and fentanyl and alcohol. When did those leave the system? That's not easy. You're an addict.
And I'm even chewing tobacco while I'm juicing kale. Like the juicing, wow. The juice thing is hilarious. Because I didn't know how much vegetables. We never even bought vegetables. Like we bought Totino's pizza rolls for, that was our groceries. We ate a lot of fast food, a lot of takeout. So when I came back with this little bag of vegetables, I put it through the juicer, and there's like 3 spoonfuls of juice. And I'm like, yeah, this ain't going to work. But yeah. And I remember I really liked, Joe does that mean green drink with the cucumber and kale and celery and green apple. And I can remember, man, the ginger and the Copenhagen, man, they had a really nice taste together. And then, it started occurring to me that maybe this is kind of counterproductive. But yeah, as my pain went away, my father passing away, I actually got rid of a lot of, I made myself a deal that like I was done with the patch after that.
The fentanyl patch.
Yeah. And I couldn't, the withdrawals from fentanyl are, oh my God, like they're terrible. So I'm kind of like, I don't know, like an engineering nerd. So I just measured like a template out, and then every time I put a patch on, I would cut a little strip off and throw it out until finally what I was cutting off was actually smaller than the patch itself. So I didn't need them anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I stopped drinking cold turkey, which probably, I suggest anyone listening to definitely go to a clinic, definitely get professional help. Because I did it all the wrong way, but it worked, and I'm super grateful that I got a second and third and fourth chance. So yes. And so along my juice fasting journey, things kept getting better and better, and the end of the 30 days is coming up, and it's like, now what do? I can't juice the rest of my life. But that's when Netflix suggested Forks Over Knives as the next one in my queue. And Forks Over Knives, it didn't just save my life. Like I literally have a brand new life from watching that film. So
when you came to the juice fast, you had gone on off. It was rocky, as you said, and why you're suggesting people to get professional help. But you came to the juice fast clean, as far as the
I
opioids
believe
and the
so.
fentanyl
Yes.
and the alcohol.
Yes.
So then
I was still doing stupid stuff, but yes, by that time,
aren't we all?
by that time, I believe I'm definitely off the alcohol. Yeah. I would say I was not taking any drugs at that time. You know what? A lot of people are afraid to make mistakes when they do, and so it just holds them back from ever making a move. I'm not a journaling kind of person, but for some reason I grabbed one of my wife's spiral notebooks, started jotting stuff down. It was all the wrong stuff, but I at least was making a connection to what I was eating was affecting me. I did all the wrong stuff. I look back now and it's like, the Greek yogurt, because that was the thing for a while. And at the same time, I was at least I was doing something. And if it was wrong, at least I was moving forward instead of just being stagnant. So I guess the motto for me was do something, even if it's wrong. And looking back, I did a ton of wrong things.
Yeah.
So you started the juice fast wanting to lose weight, but it sounds like after the 30 days, you had sort of a larger, more holistic view of who you wanted to be and what you wanted to feel like. It was about health and vitality more than just losing weight.
Sure. Well, it definitely opened up ideas like for anti-inflammatory medicine. You start reading once you're open to looking. It's kind of like when you when you get a new car and you think you're the only person that has, and then all of a sudden they're everywhere. When you start noticing things that are just like zooming by you, like a palm full of almonds and some dried cherries has the same anti-inflammatory benefits as Motrin. And it's like, no one told me that food actually has this effect. The big thing for me, and I hope you guys are glad to hear this, was dairy. Dairy was destroying me, and there was never a correlation. I grew up on a farm. I guess you never even thought about why we drink cow's milk. Like, I speak about that all over the place, but I never thought about, that's just what we did. Like, that's just what you do. But from eczema, like I had things, I guess I didn't know how many things I had wrong until they started getting fixed. And dairy was 100% like huge. My eyes were always like cloudy in the morning, eczema, joint pain like crazy. And dairy was causing so much of this, and it was needless. I suffered needlessly just because no one said, hey, cut the dairy. At least cut it and see how you feel,
And going back to the dairy, you grew up on a dairy farm. You said your dream was to have a dairy farm and be a dairy farmer. After you moved over from animal foods to plant-based and you look back, what strikes you as the strangest part of dairy farming?
So that's a good question. So I'm just going to be 100% honest.
Please.
When I transitioned, it was 100% selfish. once I started losing the dairy, losing the animal products, losing the processed food, I felt better. That's 100% my goal, was all about me, myself, to feel better for my health. I am the last person on the planet. I literally have my first buck I ever shot tattooed on me. My whole, just my whole life was antlers and shooting. And so I had never even thought about animals at all. Like, they were a commodity to me, like they were a product. And looking back, like, I can't even believe I'm saying this, but like probably 5 years later, after I switched to plant-based, I'm singing happy birthday to a cow on a rescue sanctuary, and we're like the MCs and we're doing the presentation. So it's been crazy. Things like opening day of deer season, I started making it my tradition. Instead of going out to breakfast and doing the things that we do around where I live, I just started going for runs, like long runs, and just finding different ways. But if you would have told me back then where I am now, like, first of all, I wouldn't have believed you. But it definitely, I think that we kind of see what we want to see in our bubble. And I could, my bubble, I could say, well, we never bought meat from a store, very rarely. We never bought milk from a store, if ever. And so I could tell you that that's the healthy way to do it. But now that I know what I know and my eyes are open, first of all, it's not like that at all. These factory farms they're insane. They're absolutely insane. I'm a numbers guy. I think I mentioned that with the whole engineering thing. And I did a talk one time to try to explain to people how many 9 billion chickens were, like, in 1 year. The population eats 9 billion chickens. If you take a dime and measure the edge of it, like the thickness of a dime, and you stack them side by side by side, it goes from the city of Buffalo all the way to India. That's 9 billion. Each one of them represents a chicken. That's crazy to me. That's crazy that we're doing this. Why are we doing this? Why are we drinking another species milk? Why are we drinking milk when we're weaned and we're adults? None of it made sense. And the truth is, I didn't bring this up, but a lot of why plant-based made sense to me is just the logic of it. I would be standing outside, looking at the bird feeder, wondering, the birds are just blowing through bird feed, like 50-pound bags. My poor wife is out there every day filling that feeder, and there's no birds that can't fly in my backyard because they're overweight, right? Like, I'm a huge physics buff and I know what it takes to fly. And if those birds gain a half of an ounce, they're not going to fly anymore. So it made sense to me that it's not how much we're eating, it's what we're eating, right? We're just not eating the right foods. And these products that somehow have been marketed to us through the years, they're not human food. And if we would just eat to food that humans are supposed to eat, we would get rid of so much chronic disease. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I want to go back to your dairy farm, because you weren't on a factory farm. You said you had 70 cows.
Oh,
so
yeah,
as
that's where I
you
was going.
come clear and you go back, what did you see differently about the dairy farm? Because when you were in it, before you came clear, let's say, it was fine. It was what your dream was.
It was fine because for some reason, I had this thing, and I'm sure it was partly how it was brought up, that, the difference, I think what strikes me now is the difference between, like, my two dogs and the cows. Like, I saw them as different. And, now I realize that they're animals and, they don't want to be in a stanchion 24 hours. And, you look at, like, how the past 50 years, we just keep pumping more and more, and the cows are changing. They're not even what they were 50 years ago. And it's this constant, push to get everything you can. And the cows don't want to be there. They want to be out, but I never questioned it. I never questioned it while I was in it, because I didn't see anything to question. It was just how life was. But when you're out of that bubble, you realize how ridiculous it was, and how crazy.
How do you know they didn't want to be there?
Well, because they weren't born there. I mean, they wanted to be, we would, because I live in Buffalo. So, this time of year, we could finally let the cows out of their stanchions. They've been standing in the same place for all winter. We let them out, and man, they are happy. They're kicking up, rearing up. They can't wait to, feel that mud and grass on their feet. They don't want to be on concrete. Why would they want to be on concrete, 24/7?
So a stanchion's like a stall, basically. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, some of the bigger farms will have them outside and then move them in, but they were, the older farms, they're just standing all the time. And it's no life, it's no life for them.
Speaking of foods like dairy, Dotsie mentioned in the intro that you ate fast food 4 times a day. And so that is an addiction. You said fentanyl was hard to give up. I would imagine that fast food is also difficult to give up because of the salt, fat, sugar in it. And did you have some hard times? Tell us about the challenges, because you've lost 200 pounds. From not being able to get out of your chair, you've now done all these athletic endeavors. Your life is so changed, but we know, because we're all 3 of us here human, that it wasn't a straight line to success.
No, but for the food, it kind of was that flip for me, because I'm kind of thankful that I was so kind of ignorant to all this. I had such a small knowledge of what plant-based was. It kept my life so simple. I knew that I ate lentils, beans, rice, and potatoes, and as many veggies and fruits as I could eat. That's where it ended. And that's when things were really good for me, actually. That's when they were the best. So when I went by, a fast food place, it did nothing for me anymore, because there was not food there for me. Things like gas stations became my jam, because I could go grab some bananas, or there's usually apples out or something. So yeah, the fast food was instant. Where that came back around is when I started learning about soy curls, tofu, which is kind of more recently, some of the stuff that's out there that that I had access to, but I didn't know existed. I didn't know there were Impossible Burgers. I don't think they were at the time, but I didn't know about any of that stuff. So it was super easy not to get, back into the salt, oil, and sugar.
And so how have you dealt with it now that you know that they're out there?
So
because it is easy to be a junk food vegan.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, it's definitely, it's harder for me now, because I guess it's real easy, because I'm a food addict, and it's real easy for me to take the things that used to be my cheeseburgers and chicken wings and stuff. It's real easy now, and then sounds pathetic to some people, but now it's the cashews and the cashew cheese. And even we have a pretty successful plant-based restaurant, so we make almost 3 gallons of cashew cheese every Wednesday, and we buy bales of cashews, and cashews are like my kryptonite. They're super great, right? They're healthy, but they're very calorically dense. And it's easy to get back in that addictive behavior. Same with soy curls. We have a direct line to Butler, where I think she gets 32 pounds of soy curls delivered every single week. I never used to eat that stuff. And, we make all our own scratch barbecue sauces and all that stuff. And it's really healthy. It's way more healthy than you'd find, but it is more calorie dense. So it's tough. It's a battle.
Yeah. Well, you don't eat that way, obviously, every day, because you say that you eat more volume now than you did when you were 400, but you don't count calories. So it is your day to day is not filled with soy curls and cashews, but
right
beans and tell us about what you had to eat today.
So to be honest, I'm fasting today, so I haven't eaten anything. I've had some water. I like to fast every so often. I just feel better to give my body a rest.
Yeah.
So tomorrow morning I'll definitely have oats and blueberries and flaxseed. That's one of my favorite go-tos. I eat a lot of sweet potatoes lately. I've been like really loving sweet potatoes lately. I usually eat all my food on a bed of greens,
Yeah.
because I was never a big salad person. My idea of a salad was like iceberg lettuce with blue cheese on it. So now it's
Me
more like
too.
now it's like chopped greens and chopped fresh veggies, and then I'll put some, brown rice and salsa on it or something like that. I eat pretty simple, to be honest with you. I love lentils. Lentils is my jam. Quinoa is another one. I've been laid up for almost 2 years, 3 years. I've been kind of sidelined, and that's been super challenging because I think I got away with a lot more of the cashews and stuff when I was running 50 milers. And so now what I eat matters a lot more.
Yeah.
But I'm coming on the other end to the sideline. I had a kind of a rough go. Plants fixed a lot of stuff in my life, but it didn't get rid of EDS, even though it got rid of most of the symptoms. So I still deal with some issues.
Tell us
So
about
you
the sidelining. Like what happened? What?
Oh, it was terrible. But I learned a lot. I'm super grateful for this past couple of years. I have had ankle issues forever. The EDS destroyed them, arthritis destroyed them, and then the weight on top of them made them worse. So they tried to fix my left ankle with they like tried to reconstruct it. It was pretty brutal surgery. They put some cables and anchors in there, and then they like micro fractured it to try to get new fake cartilage to grow. And it was a terrible failure. For about 2.5 years, I couldn't put weight on it. So then I got all this atrophy in my leg, and one of my neighbors thought I had a wooden leg. It was just literally bone. And I was afraid to go back to the doctor because I had hid from doctors for so long because I got burned so many times by them. So I didn't want anything to do with going back. Oh my gosh, I'm going to sound like a mess here. But then as I'm dealing with that, one morning, my legs felt like real numb, and I reached up in there to stretch, and I couldn't feel my legs anymore. And it freaked me out. So I went to the doctor through a whole bunch of different tests and stuff. At one point, they thought I had ALS, which scared the crap out of me. But my spine was pinched off so bad, they didn't even know how I was standing. And that has to do with probably a lot of the abuse I put on it. But there was a ton of like arthritis and stuff that had gathered up around the spine. So I had to get a 4 or 5 level laminectomy where they cut the bones out. He let me not get a fusion because I have a really strong core still, and I have a lot of stuff I want to do yet. So I thought, well, maybe my back would fix my ankle. So then from there, that was actually 1 year ago today. And I shared a memory just so I would remember. And we'll have to talk about that because I was actually last year, yesterday, I was on my bike with 30 some staples going right down my spine, right after I'd watch a really cool movie, which we'll talk about in a minute. So then my doctor's checking me over after spine surgery, and he goes, something's really wrong with your ankle. And I'm like, yeah. And so I went to a doctor, and I had 2 choices. I could get an amputation or a fusion. And I went with the fusion, and oh my gosh, it's the best. It's almost as good as plant-based living. I'm so thankful. They removed 4 inches of my tibia. They cut my 4 inches of my fibula. They cut my tibia flat, my talus flat, bolted everything together, and I am doing fantastic. I probably could do a 100-mile ride today. And I did a half marathon, and that was 6 months ago. So I'm doing great. I'm back in the pool, and I will be at Lake Placid Ironman July 24th.
Congratulations. That's an
I'm super happy about that.
fantastic. But do tell us that story that got you on the bike with after your spine surgery.
Yes. Well, I mean, I've had a pretty crazy ride, I've been super blessed. I went from hopeless to what am I going to do? Where's my handicap parking pass? Like that was my thing. I was in immobilized. I was a mess. And then I feel like I got my life back and it was great. And then when I went through the spine thing, they're like, well, we'll see how limited you are. And I'm laying on the couch and I'm in a couple Ironman groups. And I just happened to post like, hey, I'm bored out of my mind. Give me some inspirational films or something. And I feel like I've seen them all. And I know Dotsie from Game Changers. I know of her. And so someone suggested, hey, personal gold. And I'm like, I don't want to watch it. I looked at the previews. I'm like, I don't want to watch it. It's like,
it's about girls.
that's what I think. It's like, I want to watch like Iron Man or like Rocky or Rudy or something. It's like, and so as soon as I saw Dotsie's face, I'm like, what the heck? I remember that face. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I turned it on and it was like, it was a great movie. I'm so glad I watched it. And so, yeah, like the next day, I'm like, I got staples in me, but he told me I could get on my bike. I didn't tell him what kind of bike I had. He told me I could get on a stationary bike. So, yeah, I climbed on my bike and I did a short, like 45-minute ride, like 16 miles and low wattage. And it's like, so yeah, so thanks, Dotsie. That was
God, I love that. It's the best thing I've ever heard about personal gold. Congratulations. I mean, you did it. It was such a great story because it's like I'm a huge fan of underdogs. Like I'm huge. Yeah,
and,
me too.
And to see your talented pit crew and stuff, it was super cool.
Yeah, the husbands, right? I got to go back to, I mean, you want to be, you're going to be at Lake Placid. You are going to be at Lake Placid this summer, but you've done Lake Placid, which I know that tri-course is, my husband's been out there a few times just in industry. And it's one of the toughest tri-courses that you could pick. And you did it. And I remember
I did the half. I did the 70.
Okay. Yeah. That really short half that you did. That's still, so you said in a video that, you're coming towards the finish line and you knew you were supposed to be visualizing the finish line because that's what they tell us to do, right? So visualize the finish line. Sure. But you said you were visualizing a different finish line. What were you visualizing?
Yeah, he's trying to get me to cry. So Heather, it's like our whole life has been centered around what's wrong with me. And she genuinely has always been like so sympathetic. And so how can I help you? What can I do to make you more comfortable? And it was, I think it was just the vibe of Placid and everything. It was such a great experience. And then like, I couldn't wait to get back to her. And that's been the story for every single one of whether it's a race or even a training run, In fact, I have a tattoo somewhere on me that says, give her your best, because when I'm like really struggling, I usually look down and that's the first thing I see is give her your best. And yeah, it's been a great ride with her.
And she went on your journey too, didn't she? She's also changed her outlook, her food, her weight.
Yeah, I think she's lost 90 pounds. And her whole life. In fact, right now she's running a plant-based kitchen right now, making a few hundred meals for people for tomorrow. So yeah, it's definitely flipped our world upside down for sure.
I think you guys are personal gold part 2. Quite literally what you guys have done and your connection. I remember you saying that, for so long and now we've gotten some details, like your wife is putting on your socks and shoes every day, like you're a little kid. And so you said her eyes were always just so full of sympathy when she looked at you, which is so kind, but you also said her eyes were filled with something different when you crossed the finish line.
Yeah, she was, oh my goodness. She was so proud. Like you could just see, like, I think she was more relieved than I was. It's probably harder for her to be at these races than me sometimes. But she was just melting. Like it was, and nothing else, man. Like the whole finish line activities, everyone's in it. That's like our eyes, just like focus. It was great. And someone actually captured it with like one of my favorite pictures ever. So, but the reason for my interest in Placid, I was an outdoorsman most of my life because of the hunting and fishing. And, obviously that kind of all disappeared. And at the same time, I'm transitioning to plant-based. I really have no need to be in the woods. My cousin was really big into hiking. And he came up to me when I first started my journey, and he showed me some pictures of the Adirondacks, which I had never been there in my life. But he said one thing to me. He said, the pictures don't do it justice. You got to see this with your eyes. And I don't know, something like just clicked, and I'm like, I got to climb a mountain. So I went to my doctor, my joint doctor, and he's like, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, you got to get me out of these immobilizers. So I used to wear these things that would actually lock my knees together. So like I was like walking with stilts, because the idea was don't bend the knee because it's so damaged. You're just going to keep crunching it all up. And I said, is there any way that we could put me in braces so I can bend? I can't climb a mountain if I can't bend. And he's like, well, let me send you to a prosthetic place and they'll fit you. So they did. They casted my legs. They sent the castings to California, and they built me these titanium and carbon graphite braces that I could adjust and everything. So I went to this school, and every day after work, I would walk stairs until I couldn't. And I started with like 5 or 6 stairs, and that was it. And then the next day I'd come back and I would try to do like 7 or 8, and then started counting flights, and the flights turned into, hundreds of stairs. And then I would go by time. And throughout that winter, I was able to do a few hours of stairs, just up and down, up and down. And I got the picture here. So before July 6th, we took a ride up there. I wanted to climb this mountain called Big Slide Mountain. No idea why I picked it. I just liked the name. And we started up, and I worked so hard. I got about 3/4 of the way up, and we weren't going to make it. So we had to bail, come all the way back home. It's about a 7-hour drive, 6-hour drive. And 2 weeks later, after I recovered, I went back up, and I made it to the top. And it was the cool, like, I'm supposed to be in a wheelchair. And by that point, I was down to 1 brace. And I made it to the top of Big Slide. And since then, we're going to be living up there eventually. We've been looking for property, but we go up there as much as we can. We take the kids up there when they were younger, and it just turned into our playground. And I love the mountains. I love like the contrast between, they've taught me a lot, they've hurt me a lot, but they're just beautiful and powerful and peaceful and just everything. Like, so that's why I want to do Placid.
Great. Well, good luck in that. And we have confidence that you are going to get to the finish line. Tell us for people listening who are inspired by your story, who have huge challenges ahead of them, how do you interact with people? How can your wisdom touch them? Can they contact you?
What I want people to know more than anything is that I've had a couple of things thrown at me in life, but the truth is I'm just a normal guy. Like, there's nothing special about me. There's no magic pill. I don't have willpower. I wouldn't be an addict and 400 pounds if I had willpower. I didn't have any magic tools. This is literally just choices, and anyone can do this. I think sometimes we get so lost in, Facebook and social media, and a lot of what we see, we get this vision that people have these perfect lives, and they really don't, and my heart wants people to know that the vegan plant-based lifestyle is out there for anyone. Anyone can change. If you're still breathing, you can change your life. I need people to know that this is just choices. That's all it is.
You have a Fat Man Rants, and it's it's an encourager, and it's a plan, it's a service, and you say results are not typical, but they are expected. I fell in love with that the second I read it. What does this mean to you, and then of course the people that you help?
Yeah, I'm not sure where. I don't know where that is, but no, I usually say results are typical from this.
Are not only typical. That's what I think I've missaid it.
Yeah,
results are not only typical, but they're
expected. Okay. And sometimes that's a bad thing for me on the other side of it, because we, before COVID, we used to teach a lot of classes free to the community. And we would get people coming in, and I'll never forget this older guy. He was dressed in full camo. He comes in, he's a type 2 diabetic. And I'm teaching them how to do like potatoes in the air fryer. And this guy comes up to me afterwards. He goes, if you think that a type 2 diabetic can eat potatoes and get rid of his type 2 diabetics, you might as well just shoot me now. And so I suggested talk to his doctor and get Joel Fuhrman's book, The End of Diabetes. And this guy, like, he was such a hard case. When the class ended, they're 6-week classes we usually do for the public, and he came up and he was like, his mouth was quivering, and he stuck out his hand and he goes, you literally changed my life. And I'm like, I didn't change it, but yeah, the guy, he had been, I don't know how many units of insulin his whole life, and he got rid of type 2 diabetes by eating, whole food, plant-based. This is typical. This is what you should expect when you eat whole foods. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like, yeah, it's typical and it's expected. You just have to do it.
And so can people get in touch with you? And are you still teaching classes now? What are you and Heather doing?
Oh my gosh.
You mentioned the restaurant.
Yeah, we do too much, which is good. So it's kind of embarrassing to even say, but Fat Man Rants kind of became my jam. It's my brother-in-law was sick of me posting my food all the time because I was super excited. And he's like, dude, why don't you get a blog? And I was like, I don't know anything about that. So I threw up a Facebook page called Fat Man Rants, mostly because that was a domain that was available. And I was doing a lot of ranting back then. I was really excited about what food was doing. So anyone, like, I felt bad. Like I probably turned so many people off, but I was just telling anyone that would listen. So I picked Fat Man Rants, and we started with a couple, ironically, my brother-in-law was my first page follower, but yeah, it went up to like over 100,000 followers in a couple years, which is super fun. And for me and Heather, like, we just want to be real. We just want to be real people, and we try not to be fancy. We just keep things simple.
So you have a website, fatmanrants.com.
Yes. So we are teaching people how to do this, a little 6-week program that we set up for the community. And I don't cook with recipes, and people were getting very aggravated. So I would be making chili. I'd put a green pepper in there, and Heather would grab a green pepper, put it aside. She would gather up everything and then write down what went in there. And then during my first surgery, I decided I'm going to put all these recipes in a book for people. And oh my gosh, we put the book out as kind of a joke because the recipes are so simple. And I made a deal with myself that we would self-publish, and that I would give away one book for every purchase. And that would be in the form of either digital. We do give some paper copies away too. It went crazy on Kindle. And then we released the second part of it. That went crazy on Kindle. And then we put them together in a paperback. And I believe we've given over 40,000 copies away. It's done very well, and I don't know how to market or anything. So I don't know who's talking about it, but someone is.
Good for you. That's a lot of books. Good for you.
Yeah, it is. Just I love your biggest message is that there's always hope. I mean, when you absolutely do not think there is 1 ounce, there is hope. Will you talk to someone listening who is where you were on hope?
Yeah. I mean, I had one person say one sentence to me that probably had the biggest impact ever. And they just said, where's this going to end? And I don't know what that looks like for people, but for me, I knew exactly where it was going to end if I would just be honest with myself. So probably people that are struggling, looking for hope, the best thing they can do is be honest with themselves. The next best thing, and I know this is going to sound a little woo-woo or whatever it sounds like, you got to learn to love yourself, and everything else hinges on that. I despised myself. I think that's where a lot of my behaviors came from. There's no way you can try to get yourself better until you figure out how to love yourself. And it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird for me saying that, but through the years, I've understood that you can put all these patches and Band-Aids. You can even go plant-based. You know, you might be able to abstain from drugs and alcohol, but you got to get to the reason why this is having this effect on you. And it all comes down to, you know, and it takes practice. Like I still work on it. Like I still get, you know, I'll miss a workout or something, and my instant reaction is to start like degrading myself. But I mean, you can be your own worst enemy or your own best friend and best cheerleader. And you got to learn to get a good relationship with yourself. That's where the whole thing starts.
Tim, thanks so much, folks. Go to fatmanrants.com, go to the Fat Man Rants Facebook page, look for that awesome book of recipes that Tim has put together, the Fat Man Rants cookbook, right?
Yes. And we do a weekly live show that's probably more comedy than anything. So me and Heather hop on in our kitchen every Sunday night at 8 on Facebook. And that's
awesome.
It's been fun and comical, but yeah. And hopefully my new book will be out soon. I did my actual real book. What I call my real book is my story. So I don't know. It's been 4 years in the making. We'll see how long.
What's the title?
Well, there's a couple different options, but yeah.
We'll have you back on to talk about it when it's out to publicize it.
Yeah,
so,
sure. I appreciate that.
Great. Thank you so much, Tim.
I thank you for having me. It has been such a pleasure, and you guys are awesome. Keep doing awesome things.
Hey, folks. Okay. Back by very popular demand is our plant-powered plate fridge magnet, which you are going to receive for free if you leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. So here are the details. Just write your quick review. Does not need to be long, does not need to be a whole story. Just be honest and speak from the heart. Then take a quick screenshot of the review you wrote and email it to us at podcast@switchforgood.org. That's podcast@switchforgood.org. And include your mailing address so we can send you a power plate. We are doing this because the more reviews we garner, the higher we go in search results, which means more folks will learn about our podcast. So the power is in your hands. Leave us a review and zoom, your power plate arrives at your doorstep.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.